This is a recording of the How to Plot a Series panel from the Exploring Story Structure event hosted by the Weeknight Writers Group and sponsored by Renaissance Press. To learn more about the Weeknight Writers Group or Renaissance Press, please check out the video description below. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Plot a Series. I am your moderator, Diana Gunn. And before we get into the panel, I do want to acknowledge also that I am hosting and have organized this from Indigenous land. Specifically, I live in Canada, and I think it's important to recognize the moment that we are having nationally as the bodies are being discovered, or I should say more accurately, recovered uh, around residential schools. It's the truth is that we've known they were there for a long time, and as much as it hurts, I'm glad that we are finally having this moment of reckoning. And yeah, I just want that to be, I don't want to lose this moment. All right, so can I ask, on that solemn note, can I ask panelists to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about why you were interested in being on this particular panel, what kind of series you work on? Anyone want to go first?
I'll go first.
Awesome.
My name is Imlin Musso, and I like to work on a variety of different types of work. Mostly, I really, really love young adult, middle grade, and anything dystopia, I'm there. I wanted to be a part of this panel because I think that there is a resurgence of authors who recognize the great market appeal of putting out a really well-crafted, thoughtful series. So I wanted to be of help any way I can.
Awesome. Samantha?
Sure, you can hear me, right?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, I'm Samantha Cruz. I write dark fantasy series. I have one that's 4 books that are related and one that's a trilogy. So I was excited to talk with other authors about series and share our thoughts on how to do that.
Awesome. Anyone want to go next?
Sure, I can go next. I'm Sagan Morrow. I write polyamorous romantic comedy novels. So my series that I have is the Polyamorous Passion series. It will be a 9-book series. Right now, there are 7 books that are published in it. And I'm currently working on a sort of offshoot of that story. It's set in the same world, so we see like a little taste of those characters coming in. And the thing that really appeals to me, that really like why I wanted to come onto this panel, is because I think that so often authors think that writing a series is really hard work, and it really is like super complicated and like super complex. And I really don't believe that it needs to be. So I thought that it would be kind of fun to make it a little bit more accessible and sort of break down maybe some of the myths that might be around these kind of longer series.
Okay, I'll go next since Mary Kit and I were playing chicken there for a moment. I'm Dan Fitzgerald, and I write non-epic fantasy, and I have a trilogy called The Mare Cycle, but it's part of a larger series, as it turns out, that's called The Copper Circle. And the reason I wanted to be on this panel was because I was like, wait a minute, people plan their series? Okay, this isn't new to me. I'm very much a pantser when I write books and also when I write series. So as it stands now, I have a trilogy out and a duology in progress that's coming October and January, and then another trilogy planned. And all of it was, I say planned in the sense that now I've decided I'm going to write it. I don't know what my rough dates are going to be, but when I first started writing the first book, I had no idea where I was going or what was going to happen. But as things have progressed, I've managed to plan but I think it's pretty interesting combination of three smaller series into one larger series. So for those of you who are pantsers out there, never fear, you can write series too.
Mary?
Okay, and I'm Mary Kit Kelstow, and I also want to echo, if you're a pantser, you can write a series. And I come at writing series from two different sides, one of which being the romance world where everybody has a brother, so you have a nice cohesive 4-book series as the more planned version of a series, and then also just falling in love with your worlds and wanting to tell more stories. And I write equestrian women's lit 15-book series finished, basically because I fell in love with the barn and the characters, as well as romance of various heat levels under various pen names, as well as fantasy.
Awesome. All right. So let's get into your actual series. I guess for Mary and Dan, you're going to have to pick one since you've got a lot going on. So I guess maybe talk about the series that you're currently still working in and say, tell us how much you did before you started working on that series. Sagan?
Sure. Yeah, so my Polyamorous Passion series, I actually came up with the idea and I had published the first book within 6 weeks of coming up with the idea and actually publishing the first book. And the idea behind it, when I first sort of thought of it, it was actually going to be a TV show. And I did it because I had recently discovered that I identify as polyamorous. And I realized that a big part of it, for why it had taken me like nearly 3 decades of life to figure it out, was because I didn't see polyamorous relationships in the mainstream media, in Hollywood, in any of these types of things. So I thought it would be really wonderful to write it through the lens of romantic comedy, the very lighthearted, fun lens of romantic comedy. And when I first thought of it as a TV show, I was like, wait, the problem is this is going to take years to actually create and get it onto the screen. So I should probably write them as books first. And so I mapped out them as a 9-book series. I just wrote like a 1-paragraph description for each book in the series. And then I had that first one published. So that was kind of how I did it in terms of like planning it out right from the beginning. And the books have, of course, changed a little bit, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. But it's been really lovely to start out with that sort of just 1-paragraph description, idea, concept of each book moving forward. So I really knew how I wanted the entire series to go throughout the journey and complete at the very beginning. Before I'd even started writing the first page, I knew exactly where I wanted the series to go.
Awesome. Dan?
I'm currently working on a duology that's called the Weird Water Confluence. And when I first came up with the idea for the first book of it, I didn't realize it was connected to the previous series of the trilogy called the Mare Cycle. But then as I got into it, I was like, this actually would work well as something that's set in a separate part of the world. So each of the 3 miniseries within the larger series can be read totally separately, because one of the issues of the series, of course, is you read a 9-book series. If someone doesn't read the first book, you have to either make the series in such a way that they don't need to read each book to read the other ones, or just accept that you're going to have a certain amount of reader attrition as you go through. So my solution was to do, sort of 3 smaller series that are independent. And another side note about the duology is the first book came out of a experience I had as a teenager when I went on what's called an outdoor school on a log raft. We were on a log raft on the Mississippi River, and for like I was on it for 2 weeks. They went from Cincinnati all the way down to Baton Rouge. And I had just crazy experiences. Like, I got to write a book about this, but it was so long ago, I couldn't write a biographical thing. So in terms of the planning of it, it's really written as it's called a confluence because it's not, even though it is technically sequential, it's really 2 sort of stories that have points of contact, but the stories are largely sort of separate, but different things in each of the stories kind of weave in and out. So planned is not really the right word, but the way that I envisioned it and the way that it's kind of working out as I'm completing it is that, so it doesn't, series don't necessarily have to be like this happens and this happens and this happens. You can have, you know, side by side narratives that intersect in certain ways, and that's what I'm working on now. And the hope is that people will realize by the end of the first book, if they read the trilogy, oh wait, this is connected to the trilogy. And then some of the things that are in here, some sort of magical tech, is going to be dealt with in the third series, which is called The Time Before, which is 2,000 years before. So each of the three little mini series are connected. But to me, this one is, I'm just trying to, and I think the third series is going to be this way as well. I'm trying to tell individual stories that have points of contact that are a little bit unusual instead of just sequential.
Anyone want to go next?
Sure, I will. So my work in progress is something that I had the idea for over a decade ago, like when I was like 24, I think. So yeah, over a decade ago. And it's dystopia. And the problem was, well, I had two problems. The first is that I'm a pantser, but I don't do well as a pantser. I had to become a plotter over the years because I had so many ideas in so little time. And the other problem that I had was that I wanted to condense everything into one book. And it took me a very long time to realize how unrealistic that was, especially when I was literally building a world from scratch, building new roles, new communities, new traditions, new ways of being. So basically, I had to train myself to work with the end in mind. So what I started doing when I started really plotting this book was I had to take the character relationships. I had to see it through the entire series. Who's going to be with who at the end? Who's going to be alive at the end? The things that I want to change about the world by the end of the novel, and basically get myself to a point where I had to internalize that it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Awesome. Yeah, writing a book on its own is a pretty long haul, but writing a whole series is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. Anyone want to go next? Samantha?
Sure. Well, my 4-book series is actually a different character every book. They're related, but they're not sequential. Well, they run in order, but you can read them out of order if you want. The trilogy, on the other hand, I wrote backwards. I wrote the 3rd book first, and then the other characters and the backstory and stuff just led me backwards. So that's how I wrote that trilogy, was I just kept filling in backstory for the characters and where they came from and why their world ended up that way.
That sounds really tricky in terms of continuity. There must be a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, you have to go back and make a lot of notes.
Mary?
Sure. So I consider my fantasy work all one series, but I think of it more like a season of Doctor Who, where everything's headed kind of towards a final outcome, but you have like little 3-episode arcs in the middle of it. And so I have the big overarching series with then little 2 and 3 book series within a series, because to get where I want to go with the story, which is way down the road. And I did that, much like Dan said, to stop reader attrition, which I saw with my 15-book equestrian series. I could tell that was happening, but also because, it's daunting to get into a huge series. I mean, think of something like the Wheel of Time. You're like, oh my God. I mean, you just, to even think about getting into something like that is just way too much. And so I wanted nice little bite-sized chunks that people could get into and discover the world and then go play in other parts of the world.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones and things like that, they're a whole different world of their own. I mean, some of those books individually are longer than some series I've read. Look at Sanderson. He writes like doorstops, I swear. They're ridiculous. And I think that I don't know how they manage, honestly. Just, it's so insane on that scale to be writing epic fantasy and then also a 12-book series.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you balance plotting an individual book and making sure that the plot of the individual book is interesting while also serving the overall part of the series? Mary, let's start with you this time.
Okay, so my number one goal is to have each book have closure at the end. I hate cliffhangers, and so I do not do cliffhangers. Okay, I take that back. I did a couple cliffhangers that I was going to immediately release the next book just because it kind of had to stop there. But I like to have some closure in each book. And then in this case, I've got this big epic thing going on. So I am basically dropping little hints here and there. So as people read this, the series are going to start putting things together because we're kind of building up to a big war is what's going on. So that's kind of the, I drop hints, but make sure that the main book has closure. That's my goal.
Awesome. Sagan?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I like each book to be able to be read as sort of a neat little package or a moment in time. I really view my series as a life, right? So it's like an entire, we're just sort of seeing a snapshot of these characters' lives in a moment in time in one book compared to another. And taking that sort of approach has made it more cohesive, I have found, to write this series with a complete storyline happening in one book, but also the storyline continuing over the 9-book series. And because like mine also has it's kind of made up of like 3 trilogies, right? So the first 3 books follow one best friend, the second set of 3 books follow the second best friend, and then the third best friend as they each explore their own journey of polyamory and ethical non-monogamy. So that's been a really fun way to kind of tease ideas right from the start of what's going to be coming up in a future book so that a reader can sort of jump in at any time and then get a sense of the story. They can read that sort of moment in time, but they can also see, oh, there's something like, I want to get the backstory to this particular character, or I'm curious what's going to happen next with that kind of budding relationship. One of my favorite parts of my series is that there's this one character who has this unrequited crush that we hear about right in book 1. And it's an ongoing thing that just is sort of mentioned, or it's like teased throughout the book. So we have these kinds of little storylines and similar characters going through this series at the same time. But it is also interesting because, some of the books take place over the course of just a couple of months, and another one takes place over the course of like an entire year. So you get a lot of opportunity to really play around with it when you're writing a series like this, with being able to focus on that moment in time and also carry it through the next few books.
Awesome. Anyone want to jump in?
Sure. My process is similar to Sagan and Mary's, except that the book I'm working on is part of a trilogy. And so there will be like small resolutions in each book with a larger outcome, because my book focuses on war of a global scale. But unfortunately, because of the nature of the series, I have to create a sort of continuity. It can't be one of those one and done deals. You have to read the whole series in order to get the whole vibe, because as the series progresses, you learn more and more about the world that I've created. You have a situation as well where a large part of my book focuses on the fact that the people who are oppressed have one very specific type of culture, and their oppressors have another very specific type of culture. We're talking about families where you can have more than one father or more than one mother in the home, situations where the way that the school system, the way that the work system is set up, are all intertwined into the larger story. So for that reason, there's no way that you can get the full scope unless you read the entire trilogy.
Awesome. Dan?
Before I answer, can I ask you to restate the question one more time? I got so lost in the answers, I forgot the original question.
The question was, how do you balance making the individual plot of a book interesting while still making it serve the overarching plot of a series?
Right. So a lot of what's already been said is kind of what I do. Obviously, you want each book to be a complete arc, and to the extent that I don't generally like cliffhangers, but I think sometimes you want to close the arc of a story, but then you offer a kind of exciting and maybe even a little bit shocking peek into the next story. It's not really a cliffhanger in the sense that you finished that story, but like give people a sense for what's coming next. But in a larger sense, for those of us who are doing long series that are composed of smaller series, I think having each series be kind of its own thing and kind of different, and also within each series, each book should, I mean, this is the way I do it. I want each book to feel very different, have a different vibe, even though you might have some characters in common and some story in common. So the writing style and the way that the story happens is going to be very much me, but each book is going to be very different. And my hope is that will be interesting to some readers, because sometimes you read series and you're just like, it's just like another episode in a TV show, which is great. But I want to try something different, which is that each one is extremely different than the other ones, but still connected, because I just find it interesting for me to write that way, and hopefully some people will like that in the reading as well.
Awesome. Samantha?
Yeah, I kind of do that too. What are you saying about making each one interesting? What I do is I make it about a different character every book. They're related characters, like brothers or people who know each other, or people involved with each other, and we'll just get a snapshot of one's life, and then we'll move on to what's happening in the next one's life. My trilogy actually jumps several years in between books and jumps characters, so that's how I kept the interest in mine and the story going forward. I don't know if I could do it if I had one point of view character through the whole series personally.
That makes sense. I think a lot of series really work better with multiple points of view. I mean, if a story is big enough that you have to tell it in series, that's probably going to end up happening. So how have your plans for your series evolved as you've been writing your series? Let's start with Emlyn this time.
Sure. So one of the things that I realized I had to do early on, because when I decided to make this a series, was also give each book 2 narrators and 2 protagonists. And the reason I had to do this was because the overall book, but especially the first book, centers lifelong best friends. And I found myself, every time I would write from the perspective of one friend, kind of resenting the fact that the other character didn't have a voice. So I just decided to switch narrators each chapter. And one of the other things that I decided to do was, at the close of the first novel, we are going to lose one of those protagonists. She's going to be rendered a supporting character. And one of the characters that was picked up in the first book is going to become our second narrator in the second book. And so I've been doing that to kind of explore these characters and flesh them out more, because ultimately in the 3 books, you have these 3 friends who ultimately save the world. And that's the only way that I could do them justice. I considered doing it the way that J.K. Rowling did for the Harry Potter books, and speaking in third person. I didn't feel that was intimate enough. And I always kind of resented the way that some of the supporting characters are only seen through our protagonist's eyes. I didn't like that either. So this was the best way that I felt that I could do these characters justice.
Awesome. Anyone else want to jump in? Mary?
Yeah. So my series changed in probably two profound ways. One of which is I started writing in this world as an alternate history set about 1860. And I wrote my young adult book and then basically got scared. I'm like, I don't think I can do this justice. I don't do young adult. And so I thought, well, what if I start modern day? So I thought I was just going to take the historical stuff, bring it into modern day. And all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm writing this big fight against the bureaucracy, rage against the machine type of contemporary fantasy with magical animals. And the second part of that is I'm writing along and I know there's going to be some conflict coming up. I also write mythology stories around Taiki and her resort in the Bahamas, Par Impar. And all of a sudden I went, oh my God, that big bad in that mythology, that battle is what they're going to be fighting. So now I'm like, oh my God, now I'm going to have this big, like, Avengers Endgame style global magical battle that's going to have to come in some series eventually. But those are probably the two big things. Is the scope of my books completely changed and the time period completely changed.
Let me jump in, since your oh my God moment has reminded me of some things that have happened to me. Obviously, I've mentioned that I'm a pantser or a discovery writer, if you prefer the term. So I'll be writing along and I have kind of an idea where things are going, but then something will happen. Some character will say something and it'll give me this idea and I'll be like, oh my God. And the book that I am publishing in October, I didn't realize when I started it there was going to be any kind of a romance element or love story, but it just happened. And there was this moment of chemistry. I was like, oh, dang. And then that totally changed that book very much for the better. I mean, it became kind of central to the book as it happened. And I think it happens every time I write a book. And I'm sure it happens to everybody, even if you're even if you plan your books, there are things that don't go according to plan. I mean, there's this idea that you are either a planner or you're a pantser, and there's nothing in between. But obviously everybody's plans change, and even pantsers kind of have some idea of where they're going. They just kind of change maybe a little bit more easily. But I just think what happens in the book, and sometimes what happens in one book, gives you an idea for, oh, maybe the next book should be about this instead. So the third book in my trilogy, I was originally going to be one thing, but then there was a situation where a baby was born, and I was like, oh, well, that baby should be the main character of the next book. Therefore, it's going to be set 20 years later. And so the book was completely different than it might have otherwise been, but I think it was kind of fun. So I just kind of go with the flow, and change is part of the process.
I'll jump in because I completely agree. Change really is part of the process, and going with the flow and kind of, we might have an idea of something, but nothing has to be set in stone, right? When you're the author, you get to really make your own rules. You get to see where the story takes you and where the characters take you. So my answer to this question isn't the most PG. I will just warn all of you right now. But for my series, the pandemic was a big issue for me because I had already written the first 6 books. They were exactly like the plot in each of the first 6 books was exactly what was supposed to happen from that like initial sort of plan. The final 3 books were supposed to follow the story of this character going to a bunch of sex parties and getting really into the local kink scene. And at the time, I had been planning on doing a lot of in-person research for this, which couldn't really happen when the pandemic hit. So I was kind of like, well, I can either just like wing it and kind of guess for a lot of this, or I can just take the story in a different direction. And so I decided to take the story in a different direction. And so book 7 ended up being about a dance competition, and it worked out so well. I introduced a new character. Her main love interest in that story is someone who I didn't even know was going to be in the books at all, and I adore him. So it's been kind of cool to see that kind of happen. And it also means that at this point, I have 2 more books left to write in the series. And I have a vague idea of what they're going to look like. But I have a feeling that once I start outlining them, they're going to, like, there might be a little bit of from what I had initially planned, but they're probably going to be very different from what I had initially planned. And sometimes that happens, and that's okay.
For sure. Samantha?
Yeah, for mine, I didn't write them backwards the second time. That was difficult. So, for my second series, I made sure to have the one that would show up in the next book appear towards the end of the book, so people would be introduced to them and invested in them before they jump to the next book, so they'd want to pick up the second book. They're not like intertwined where you have to read them all in order, but if you liked one character, I wanted to make sure you could find them in the other books too, and entwine their stories that way. So that's the main change from the first series to the second. I actually planned it a little better. It took way too much notes about write it backwards.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way, right? Especially with creative things. So there is a question from the audience that I am going to put a little bit of a twist on, since some of you have already kind of touched on this. And I'm going to ask, how and when do you know what the POV characters are going to be for a specific book in your series? Anyone want to start?
I'll start. I think the POV finds me, honestly. Before I get the idea of what a book is going to be, I kind of imagine a character in my mind. Then I build the world through that character's eyes, essentially. And the person who is irreplaceable, who the story, the entire perspective would collapse without, that becomes my main character.
I will jump in and add. So it was mentioned in the chat. I mentioned in the chat that the good side characters become future POV characters. So in the duology, there was a side character that that the main characters ran into, and I was like, she's really cool. Like, I want to write about her. And this is actually the moment where it crystallized to me that I wanted the 2 stories to be sort of side by side, sort of with only these tenuous and occasional connections. And it was very easy, because as I finished writing the rest of the book, that character was gone. She only appeared in one scene, but she kind of started inhabiting my mind. And so when I came to start the second book, she was there and ready to go. So if you have a side character that you love, they're definitely going to be the POV or character in your next book. So just roll with it.
I can confirm, because the 6-book series I'm currently planning is about a side character from my 2-book series. So, Mary?
That's how it begins. It's a slippery slope. I am where the point of view characters choose me, because I know what stories I want to tell, or what piece of the larger story I want to tell. So, like, for example, I am hoping to dive into young adult with some academy stories dealing with my Pegasus Academy, and I wanted to get that set up. And so the main character of a former concert pianist with rheumatoid arthritis came to mind, and as somebody who struggles with that, with the chronic illness, I understand a lot of what she was going through. And so, yeah, she was like, okay, I'm going to run this academy. This is how I'm going to get there. This is what's going on. So, yeah, my characters kind of come to me, but I also like to put a lot of myself in my characters. So it's like the characters come to me, but they're the stories I probably would have told anyway.
I'll
Second?
jump in. Sure, yeah. I think that one of the really important questions to kind of ask yourself when you're trying to figure out what character to choose for the point of view is really, what character do you want to spend time with? right? You're going to be spending a lot of time with this character. So who do you want to spend that time with? It doesn't mean that that character needs to be someone who you like and that kind of thing necessarily, but who do you want to spend time with? Every character is, once you delve into it, is going to have a story, right? Every character has so much background. So you might find every single character to be really interesting, but who's the person that you really want to spend the most time with? And whose story do you think is most important from their perspective to really tell, right? What is the message that you want to be sharing with this particular book, and whose point of view is going to most accurately sort of tell that particular message through your story? So that's kind of how I like to sort of approach it.
Awesome. Samantha?
Yeah, I really agree with her. When I'm lucky, I have like 1,000 characters waiting in my head to be written, so I don't really have to search very hard for mine. But it's usually whoever I want to spend the most time with, because there's an order of the characters I like. I prefer some of them. I want to tell their stories, but also you can completely start a book in somebody's point of view and then realize that's the totally wrong point of view and have to rewrite the whole thing, because I've done that. So yeah, you just have to start writing and see where it takes you. And if you like being in that character's head, if you don't, then don't force it. See if you can jump to somebody else's in that situation, I think, because you are going to spend a lot of time with them, and you have to kind of like them. I mean, I've written characters that I don't particularly like spending time with, but it's really difficult. It's better if you like the character you're spending time with, for sure.
Yeah, with those point of view characters, you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. So you at least want to find them entertaining, even if you think they're jerks.
Yeah,
As I might think about a couple of mine.
Yeah, I'm planning one in the next series that I think I'm going to love to hate, and it's going to be interesting to write because I haven't written that yet, but it should be fun.
Awesome. So another audience question is, how do you deal with recapping stuff from previous books and catching people up to speed who either, maybe haven't read the first book, or who haven't read the first book in like a year or two and are now coming to the second book and need a bit of a refresher? How do you deal with that without overwhelming readers who are actually like binge reading your series?
Mm.
Want to go first?
I can. Well, for me, I am jumping characters, so I try to work in thoughts of the previous happenings in there, but not in like info dumps, because you don't want to do that. But if you can sneak in little bits here and there from a different point of view, it'll change what happened because you're in a different point of view, and it'll keep it interesting, I think, to the reader, because it's being seen a different way. And that's how I do it anyway. But I change characters every book, so.
I think of it as a bit like leaving breadcrumbs. You don't want to leave a whole loaf, but if you leave a few crumbs here and there, just sort of like you do with any other aspect of storytelling. And if you give too much of any one thing at one time, it becomes tedious, but a little bit here and a little bit there. So like I would never give a whole paragraph in my writing style of background, but a little bit here, a couple sentences here, reference there is helpful. And I mentioned this in the chat, but I want to emphasize it. I follow a crap ton of book bloggers on Twitter, and the number of times I've heard someone say, thank you to this author for including a recap at the beginning. So literally it's just like sort of like at the beginning of a TV show where they give you that 30-second overview previously in whatever. Someone can always skip over that if they don't want to, but if you have a couple pages that say, hey, this is recap, if you want to read it, read it. If not, this is where the book starts. And I did that in the third book in the series after seeing like the 27th person say they wished this was done more often, etc. So consider it. It may not be something that works for everybody, but a lot of people really appreciate it, and I will do it now, here on out, forever. And
Mhm.
mine are called literally previously in the Mare Cycle or previously in this, sort of like it would be on TV. Kind of, maybe it's a little cutesy, but I think, it works.
Yeah, I've actually seen conversations about this starting to happen in the book space, and I'm all for it. I think having recaps in the beginning of books is a great idea, and I plan to do that in my second book. I think that's a really great way to make it more accessible and more reasonable for, book bloggers who have read probably 1,000 books since they read your last book. Emlyn, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Well, like I said, I'm working on a trilogy, and I guess I'm very old school in the sense that if you know it's a trilogy, why are you reading book number two first? So it's one of those situations where we're dealing with the same 2 or 3 characters for the entire trilogy. And I want to avoid information dumping as well. So basically, what I do with each following book is I throw the breadcrumbs in there. I throw the information in there. So by the time you're 5 chapters in, you will have a a pretty reasonable grasp of what happened in the previous book. But I mean, if I were going to do, I don't know, a 17 book series, then yeah, I would do. I think what Samantha does is much more reasonable. Just new characters, new situation, give your readers closure after every single book. But I think if it's only a trilogy, I kind of view it as a TV show in that sense. If a TV show is only 5 seasons, don't jump in season 3 and be like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not going to do it soap opera style where you can just jump in and like pick up and know the story exactly. I think that if a book, if there's a book series and it's only, 4 books or less, then you're doing the canon a disservice by not reading the entirety of it.
I would agree with that. I think there's definitely also there's a place for those big series that, they have a new character every time, or, the mystery series that follow the same detective over like 30 years.
Right.
But there's also a space for smaller stories and more smaller feels like the wrong word, but more tightly woven and intentionally like begun and ended stories. Something where you begin with the end in mind, which is not the case in a lot of the like big 17 book series.
I do also want to add, I just saw someone in chat mention a glossary. There's going to be a glossary in all the books. There has to be, because like I said, I'm world building. And because of that, there are new words for devices that exist in our world, or devices that I have made up, situations that I have made up. So there's going to have to be a glossary just so people understand what's going on. Like, I don't want my readers to get lost, but at the same time, this is one story in continuum and not just a new character in a new situation. So like I said, for that reason, I feel like if book 2 picks up exactly where book 1 left off.
Sagan, did you have any thoughts to share on this?
Yeah, I do. I think one of the really good questions to ask yourself when you're writing a book series and you're trying to sort of figure out, okay, how much recapping do I need to do? Like, where, like this, it can get kind of out of control, right? It can get a little bit intense. But I think a good way to start thinking about it is to really think about, what did I need to do in book 1? How much backstory was really required for people reading this book? Because anytime people read any book, it needs to start somewhere. We're not usually starting a book with this child was born, right? Like the child is being born. It's the very first, like that's not how most books start. So how much backstory did the reader actually require in order to start at page 1? And kind of approaching all of your books that way, that really helps to, again, sort of have those, as the others have said, having those sort of like breadcrumbs sprinkled out throughout, right? So figuring out what information is actually important or necessary. For me, my books are more sort of novellas, like they're quite short novels. And because of that, every single sentence really counts. And I don't want to do a bunch of recaps. I really don't want to spend my time doing that. I don't think that my readers want to be reading that in these shorter novels. So what I found really helpful is kind of approaching it from, okay, in this first chapter, what is a one sentence recap that will bring readers up to speed? What is one sentence that will help them understand what's going on? So for example, when I started writing I think it was book 4, I sort of approached it from this sense of we're moving into like the second main character, because the first 3 books had been one main character, and now we're moving into the next character's sort of main story. And so she mentions briefly, because we're seeing the world through her eyes, she says, oh, her friend Emma had a polyamorous relationships, and like that had got like it had been difficult for her at first, but she had managed to overcome it with her 2 boyfriends, but that would never work for Helen, right? Of course, things turn out very different than Helen expects. But we can kind of see how you get this sort of sneak peek of, oh, that's what happened in the first 3 books. Those first 3 books were sort of about Emma, but it's only in one sentence. And I would really encourage you, when you are writing a series, to look at it from that sort of way, in terms of what's a one sentence recap? What is really actually important for my readers to know? And also, what can I just kind of tease at them so that they'll think, I'm kind of curious about that. I want to learn more. All right, you can go back and read the previous book then.
Awesome. We are coming to the end of our time, so I'm just going to get everyone to wrap up by reminding us what your series is, where people can find you, and just leaving us with a final piece of parting advice for anyone who is looking at writing a series. Let's start with Sagan.
Okay. I think my parting advice would really be to keep in mind that this isn't set in stone, that you can have a general idea and just see where it takes you. Have fun with it. Writing is hard, or it can be really hard, but it doesn't need to be just through that sort of lens. We can have a lot of fun with it. So I'd really encourage you, if you're thinking about writing a series, test it out, enjoy the process, right? And really do see where it's going to take you. You get to make your own rules along the way. You can plot everything out in advance and then scrap the entire thing and start fresh if you want, partway through. You get to make the rules. You're the author. So that's my parting sort of suggestion here. And if you want to learn more about my books, the writing that I do, and that kind of thing, then you can always search for Polyamorous Passions on your favorite ebook store, or visit saganmorrow.com/books. I also host the Indie Author Weekly podcast, sort of sharing behind the scenes of my writing journey, writing tips, inspiration, all that kind of thing. So you can check out Indie Author Weekly podcast at saganmorrow.com/podcast. And I spend a lot of time on Twitter and Instagram, so you can always hang out with me there at Sagan Lives.
Mary?
So you can find my books at marykitkelstow.com. I also have a free story that I'm writing for my newsletter subscribers that you can get when you sign up there. It features a magical chicken and a former police detective. So always a good time. And you can follow me at Twitter at Charmed Ozarks. My series, it's The World of the Museum. But you can I'd recommend starting with the Pegasus Project, which tells the story of a former concert pianist with RA trying to teach a Pegasus filly with PTSD to fly.
That was an awesome book. I read it.
Oh, thank you.
Samantha?
Yeah, my parting advice is to not focus so much on it being a series, and don't worry. I mean, keep notes about things that are going to be important later, but don't like panic yourself that you're writing a series and it has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can always edit later and go back and find things that you need to know. I mean, you can always go look at the book you wrote before that and make notes. So just have fun with it is my advice. I have a free story on my newsletter. Sign up for that. I'm on Twitter at author Cruz, Kroese. All my books are on Amazon and they're in Kindle Unlimited too. So that's where you can find me. I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm on all social media, but I'm on Twitter more.
Emlyn?
Sure. My parting advice, and this is not just to writers, but specifically writers who are huge TV or movie buffs. My parting advice would be to write in a cinematic way. You're going to be more engaged with your work, and your audience is going to be more engaged with your work if they can actually imagine it on a screen. At least it's the way it is for me. I'm also an editor. And so the other piece of advice that I would give is don't edit when you're writing. Don't edit in the writing process. This is why my work in progress is still a work in progress and I haven't finished it, because I have at least 12 drafts of the first book. So don't do that. The writing process should be a fun process. It should be enjoyable. I feel like you should have strong feelings about all of your main characters and your primary supporting characters, whether you love them or hate them. Don't write people who you feel lukewarm about. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Please Leave a Message. And if you need an editor or a copywriter or a ghostwriter, you can find me at emusoediting.com.
Awesome. Dan?
Hi. So my parting bit of advice or message would be, ask yourself two things. What is the one thing that that you bring to the table that is going to be common throughout all of your series? And then the other question is, how is each book going to be distinct and different from the other books in the series? Because to me, it's really important to have both a common thread, but also really not, I mean, like different POV styles, different structures, you know, something where each book is like, oh yeah, I remember, like, I like this part about this writing, but oh wow, this is totally different. So that's my goal.
Yeah, you don't want the books to blur together.
Well, I mean, right. I mean, it can work for some things, like, but it's not, I don't know, it's not for everybody. So my info is in the chat. I have a trilogy out called the Mare Cycle, which is like, if like a D&D campaign with less slaying and more role playing. And I'm writing a duology now that I'm calling Sword Free Fantasy. That's got quite a bit more romance and I think 0 deaths. Yeah, 0 deaths
So far, that we know of.
I'm committing to it. I'm committing to that. It's a little heading toward the romance territory.
Okay, you know we're recording, so like this is for posterity's sake. You have now committed to not killing anyone in this duology. Are you okay with that?
I am 100% confirmed on that. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I can't make that kind of promise. I kill people.
Well, people die in mine all the time, so.
Yeah, me too. Do not read my books if you don't want anyone to die. I'm nice to like not kill too many main characters at once. I don't go like full George R.R. Martin, but yeah, if you don't want anyone to die, my books aren't for you. Mm-hmm. Jimmy says, I didn't know you were allowed to not kill characters. That's Thanks,
I think that's
Jimmy.
really common though in sci-fi and dystopia. Like someone's gonna get got most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to in these genres write a lot of stories about war, and I feel like it almost cheapens the impact. Certainly, like in my books, that's a large part of why pretty much you can always guarantee someone will die, because I feel like it kind of cheapens the impact of war if nobody dies. Maybe I just feel that way because I watched a lot of 90s sci-fi, but all right, thank you so much to everyone who was on this panel. You were all really lovely, and thank you to so much of course, now right at the end I trip up. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended today's panel. This has been really great, and I also want to thank Renaissance Press for sponsoring us and giving us access to live captioning for this event. Thank you for watching How to Plot a Series. To learn more about the Weeknight Writers Group, Renaissance Press, or any of the panelists involved in this panel, please do check out the links in the video description below.